Hello, coders. Good afternoon. Good evening, in fact. It is Thursday, the 6th of May. It is episode 100. We are now in three figures. This is insane. This is great. And today I want to talk about 10 web development resources that have helped me improve in my career. I'm taking this opportunity as a way of thanking resources that I've used, and I'll provide links to all of this once the show's done. I'll go through the description. I'll put my notes in that I've got just here. So this is nuts, man. 100 episode 100. It's been an interesting ride, one that I've really and truly enjoyed. And I'm so grateful. So grateful for everyone who's listened, who's watched. I mean, the thousands of people who have listened on the podcast, because obviously this goes out to the podcast players. This is obviously live. This is we never did this live when we started. So if you've got any questions, if you've got any comments, if you've got any suggestions, if you've got any anything you want to talk about, then let me know in the comments, and we'll pick that up throughout the day. Thank you very much for throughout the show. Thank you very much, Tom, for joining episode 100. Nice, thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. So I guess before we get into this list of the 10, actually there's more than 10, but it's been difficult to try and fit these all into just 10. 10 is a nice number. But before we do that, I just want to say, I want to answer some questions that I've had recently regarding why am I doing so much streaming recently? Why am I doing it more on YouTube and less on Twitch? I want to just kind of curb those kind of questions. No, I haven't stopped streaming on Twitch. However, I have stopped streaming on Twitch on Tuesdays. I used to do Tuesdays in the mornings. But that was proving to be a little bit tiresome, I suppose. You would have to get up at 6:30, and then I would stream from 7 till 8:30, and then I would have to do a lot of context switching to get into working mode. So we've cancelled that. And also, I'm trying to get fitter, so I'm trying to use the 6:30 morning wake-ups to actually do some exercise before the start of the day. So, for instance, today, I went for a nice run with Murphy in the morning. But the reason why I'm streaming more on YouTube at the moment is because I've got some time off. I'm between contracts at the moment, and therefore I've got a bit of time off. And I'm working on the How to Code Well website, which is what I would be doing anyway. And I just decided that hey, sod it, I'll just do it live. So the code that I'm writing on YouTube at the moment would be the code that I would write anyway on my time off. Today, for instance, we did. This is the third stream of today. That's how busy it's got, I suppose. So I did a stream in the morning, and then I had my lunch break, and then I did a stream in the afternoon. So it's basically like me just coding for a day, just live in front of a camera. And I must say, I do confess, I have been turning off from the comments and just sort of going at it as a coder. So and then sort of peering onto the comments whenever I've got 5 minutes. But it's a great insight to my brain and how it works, I suppose. So yeah, now tomorrow though we won't be doing a stream in the mornings because I've actually got my second COVID jab booked for tomorrow. So we won't be doing a stream tomorrow morning, but we might be doing one in the afternoon. Anyway, that is that. So I want to talk about these 10 web development resources that I have used and have improved me as a coder. And I just want to use this as a shout out to all these resources throughout my coding career because they've been brilliant. None of this is in any kind of order, and it would be very difficult for me to put these in a particular order because certain ones of these resources have helped me in different ways, and it's very difficult for me to measure how much of an impact those ways have helped me through. So I guess the first one we'll talk about is regex tester. So this is regex101.com. Now, whenever I'm writing regex, I always have to look at the documentation. It's one of those things that I just don't have capacity for in my brain to remember all the regex commands, all the aliases, all the funky characters. I don't, you know, I always need to look at a resource, and that is regex101.com. So massive thank you for that. That is a very good website for putting in your string that you want to check and the pattern in which you want to use. And it breaks it out between, you know, the different groups and what's been found and what hasn't been found. A resource that I've found, I suppose, in the last few years, though, is PHP regex.com. This is so good. So, I mean, primarily I'm a PHP developer. Doesn't matter which way I cut it. Yes, I do JavaScript. Yes, I do Python. But on the face of it, I do more PHP stuff. PHP regex.com gives you the regex tester that you would get from regex 101, but in a PHP way. So if you know that you are going to be using preg match, preg match all, preg replace, preg grep, or preg split, it will allow you to choose those functions and then give you the output of the output that you would get if you were to do this in PHP code. That is so good. That is so good. So that's the first one, is regex tester, regex101.com, and also PHP regex.com. I can't talk about regex 101 without talking about PHP Live, because I've been using that quite a bit. Okay, so number two is a resource excuse me, that I've been using for a long time. It's probably a resource that I kind of thought it was part of the W3C consortium, but it's not. It's called W3C Schools, w3cschools.com, 3 with a number 3, so w3schools.com. Excuse me. Oh, I've forgotten to do this. Cheers, everybody. Cheers. Happy 100, eh? So W3C Schools is a great library of resources for things that are that every web developer really needs to have a grasp on. So HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and then it goes into sort of more detail in terms of jQuery, React, XML, Python, Java, and the list goes on. It's great for actually seeing, trying things out. So they've got a section in there where you can actually try. You know, you write code and you press a button and it shows you what the output is. Now, I kind of see that a little bit like CodePen, in the sense that you can actually, like I said, you can actually try code out and you can write code. So CodePen is also another really good resource, because it's a great way for you to see what other people have done as well, and how they've tackled the same problem that perhaps you've tackled, or perhaps you're questioning how to tackle, and then you can actually see how they've done it. And CodePen breaks up the code between, say, HTML and JavaScript and CSS, whereas W3C Schools is more of a library of resources. But I kind of use those two very interchangeable. It's very good. Very good. And of course, with CodePen, it's more of a sociable thing. So you can actually create your own CodePens and then share them to the world, which is great. So it's almost like you're building your own portfolio. So those two I would group together. So W3C Schools and CodePen. Talking about, though, writing code on a browser, because essentially that's what CodePen is. There is another one that it's called, now I always get the pronunciation of this wrong, Replit. And this does have a free thing, but it also has paid for accounts and stuff. This allows you to do coding in the browser, and again, share that as well, and also get sort of instant feedback from the code that you've created, and you can code in various different languages. So check that out as well. That's replit.com, replit.com. So what have we said? We said regex, regex 101. We've had PHP Live, regex.com. We've had W3C schools. We've got replit, and we've got CodePen. And Tom's saying that W3C School now do paid courses worth investigating. I don't know. I've never done the paid courses, but if they're as good as their free courses, then I would imagine it would be worth it, because that's really good. Their library of stuff is something that I have lent on quite a lot. I tell you what, that it's the stupid things that I forget that this website I'll be able to identify. Like I said, I'm mostly a PHP dev, and when I write React and stuff, and I'm in the React world for a couple of months, when a project comes along and the project isn't React, and I have to learn how to actually do things in the normal way of HTML, I was going to say the proper way. Whoops, that would get me in trouble. The normal way, I suppose. Of HTML. So where you're, instead of doing imports in React, in JavaScript, you're actually pulling down JavaScript files from a CDN, or maybe you're linking to a CSS file. I totally forget how to do that. If I've gone from PHP to PHP to React, and then suddenly I go from that to just standard JavaScript, I end up having to sort of backpedal a little bit and relearn and remember how to do all of the things that you kind of really need to know. And W3C Schools helps me with that. Another one is so talking more about sort of front-endy stuff. MDN, and I keep pronouncing this as MSN for some reason. MDN, as I've got in my notes, MDN. So this is the Mozilla Developer Network. So Mozilla, Thunderbird, Firefox, but these are resources that aren't, so they don't sell you those things, those open source projects. These are resources to gain insights into compatibility of JavaScript APIs, of CSS, and when I say compatibility, I mean of browsers. That's the thing that I really use, is to find the compatibility of versions of browsers. And to learn, so I used this a lot when I was learning local storage versus session storage in JavaScript. Really good resources there on MDN. This is developer.mozilla.org. Again, I'll put link after this stream. I'll put all the links in. I just didn't have time before I started. So Mozilla Docs, great for JavaScript browser compatibility and APIs, and also they have guides for like complete beginners and all the way up to advanced. So and those guides are pretty good. And again, I use this like a library of knowledge, a font of knowledge. Whenever I Google something and I see an MDN link, I'm usually like, yeah, okay, that is the thing. This is like the documentation written by the people who have written the thing. So, it's going to work. And if it doesn't work, then I'm doing it wrong. There's something I've written that isn't quite right. So that's that. And then the next one is... I'll mention that one in a minute. So GitHub Learning. This is the learning.lab. Sorry, lab.github.com. Lab.github.com. This is a great place to learn GitHub. GitHub is one of these tools that every developer needs to learn. However, it doesn't. Knowing Git isn't something that will help you. Well, it will help you become a better programmer, but it won't help you learn how to program. It'll teach you how to manage your application in source control, which is a huge tool that every developer needs to learn. Every developer needs to learn how to manage their Git repositories or in the old days, it was SVN and other source tree, or not tree. Oh, I forget the name. I'm not even going to go back there. But there was other source control systems, management systems that I used to use. But Git is the way forward. Everybody's using Git now. Everybody should learn Git and learn it really well. And in my opinion, this is where I get very opinionated now. I think everybody needs to learn Git. When I say everybody, I mean front-end developers, back-end developers, the spectrum of developers needs to learn Git on the command line. Do I want to go down this rabbit hole? So when you learn Git on the command line, yes, it is like just sort of going into the deep end, the big deep end that is the command line. But once you learn the commands, you become quicker at it. If you were to do a Git checkout and then a Git merge and then a Git push, if you were to do all of those three actions using a web interface, using a bunch of buttons, you're going to be far slower doing that than you would be typing those commands out and actually getting those commands on the command line and actually executing those. So, I mean, obviously, in some cases, some of those commands can do terrible things if you don't use the right commands in the right order. The ones that do get slightly messy are perhaps rebasing and merging and all that jazz. And maybe with that, you do want to see a representation, maybe in a GUI, of what you're going to actually do and once you actually execute those commands. But for things like git pull, git push, git merge, git commit, git add, check out a new branch, check out an existing branch, git fetch, all of those, do those in the command line. Do those in the, you will be SVN, yeah, Tortoise SVN, that's it. Thank you, Tom. Tortoise SVN. Oh, gosh, that brings me back. That brings me back. Tortoise SVN. Yeah. So, yeah, so learn Git, and I would learn Git through git-scm.com. So that's the Git documentation. That website, it might appear to be quite overwhelming at first, but once you start wrapping your head around the mechanics of Git, and you can see the diagrams that are offered on that website. So this is git-scm.com. Then you can, it kind of clicks, when it's showing you how histories merge and all of that stuff, it starts to make sense. But talking about, I mentioned the GitHub Learning Lab. Talking about GitHub, though, because this is probably where a lot of people will store, the majority of people will store their code when they start out. That website, lab.github.com, has some really great articles and sort of resources, I suppose, for things like GitHub Actions, which I've been using more and more recently, especially with the How to Code Well site. So more and more I've been using GitHub Actions and using their lab to understand things like, the other day I learned the difference between the on statement. So in the GitHub Action, you can do on and then on push, on pull. And that was how I used the lab to understand those things. So you're triggering the actions on those particular actions on actions, yeah, that kind of thing, and how to use other actions and download other actions and all of that stuff, and import those into your workflow. But also it's got things like Markdown documentation, which is great. It's also got DevOps on GitHub, which is great. And also they split up different learning paths as well. So if you want to learn a specific technology, then they may have a good resource on that lab. So lab.github.com. Excuse me, I need to drink some more beer. Okay, so then we get down to this kind of generic bucket of documentation, and this is framework documentation. So if you're ever using a framework, then you want to make sure that you are learning the framework. you want to be going through the documentation of the framework. So the best ones I've had are things like jQuery, really good. I mean, I've used jQuery more than any other JavaScript framework ever, just because I've been a developer for such a long time, and I think the majority of my projects at some point have had an element of jQuery in them. So the jQuery documentation is really, really good, and also things like PHP.net, that's really good. If you're a PHP developer and you haven't seen that website, do check it out. Then you've got your the new kids on the block. You've got your React. You've got your Vue.js. Very good documentation. Tailwind is really good documentation. So if you're a Tailwind dev, then check that out too. So this is kind of like a bucket of things, right? A bucket of framework docs. So make sure you understand and use the search facilities of those of that documentation. Another one that has been growing on me is the Stripe documentation as well. I'm slowly getting used to that, as you've probably seen on the streams. And then we're going to move into more sort of articles and blogs, things that I've been following and reading and in digesting throughout my many years in my career. The first shout out goes to Smashing Magazine, because that is it's like an online magazine for web developers, and it's just full of some really, really great resources and blogs and articles that have been written by developers who have learnt, who are really good in a particular sort of area, and so they share nuggets of knowledge, and so you can get lost in that website because you end up just learning and learning and learning and learning. The amount of articles I've read on Smashing Magazine to do various things is huge. Smashing Magazine, check that out. That's smashingmagazine.com. Great articles, great tutorials. Also, the David Walsh.name. He has created a blog, and he regularly updates that blog, and he's got some really great articles, mostly front end, although I think he does have some WordPress-y type stuff as well. But it's really great articles on things that everyday web developers would kind of question or do, or like for instance, I've used his stuff on HTAccess before, and he will discuss. He will talk to you when you read it. It's like he's talking to you, and like all of this stuff, it's almost like the author is talking to you as you read it. It's almost like he's talking in your context. He's sort of the articles that I've read that he's created are based on the questions that I've had, and he's answered those questions and had the same question and tackled the same thing in the way I would do it, which is really great. So I kind of feel that's a blog that I will always go back to, I think. So David Walsh.name, really, really great. Really good WordPress JavaScript snippets in there too. And I guess this is less of a blog, more of a which one is it? This one is, I don't think I've actually put the link down. No, I haven't. CSS Tricks. That is a really good website for learning CSS, obviously. And this is full of very great visuals for things like floats, flexboxes, grid, all of those kind of things. And they give you, I guess, diagrams that show you what the elements should look like and show you how they react with other elements as well. It's really, really great. If you're struggling with Flexbox, if you're struggling with Grid, then do check that out. And that is CSS Tricks. So yeah, I'll quickly go through them all again before we shoot off. So the first one is regex, and I mentioned there regex101.com and PHP Live regex.com. And then we discussed W3 Schools. So that's w3schools.com. And then MDN, which is developer.mozilla.org. That is the great resource for learning compatibility issues and also JavaScript APIs. We talked about Replit, so that is the coding on the browser and sharing that out. Same as CodePen. Well, not this. No, it's not the same as CodePen, but in the same sort of context, in the sense that you can create code and then share that to the public. So Replit has sort of paid for and free accounts, and I think CodePen is more to do with sort of sharing that out. It's really great, CodePen. I really do dig that. Then you've got the GitHub Learning Lab. So that's his learning various things to do with GitHub, as well as just general web development topics. Talking about Git, we then have the Git-SCM, which is the documentation of Git, and that is really great. You just have to take your time to digest it. And then you've got your framework documentation. So whatever framework you're using, please do check out that framework, or whatever programming language you're using too. And then we've got your you got the CSS tricks, David Walsh, your Smashing Magazine, and I haven't mentioned this yet, but Stack Overflow. So Stack Overflow is a website that I don't necessarily just, go through and read like a book. Stack Overflow is a website which I use for errors, and I use the search of Google far more than I use the search of Stack Overflow. But when there's a Stack Overflow post that has an answer to it, I go there immediately. So what happens with Stack Overflow is people will post errors, common errors, and it's a question and an answer. So they will post the error code, and then someone will answer that. And obviously the OP will give the context as to how they got to that error. It's indexed so well that if you were to put the error code into Google, that error code will be picked up in Stack Overflow. So Google will index the Stack Overflow posts and pinpoint the Stack Overflow post that has that error code in that you're looking for. And so if that's answered, that is perfect. That's really good. And it's also really good to read the comments and also see how other people have tackled that problem as well. And I suppose we should also say that GitHub is a great way to learn to become a better developer, because you get more of an opinion of when you've got an issue on GitHub, and you can read people's error logs, and you can get an insight as to how different developers have tackled things differently. You kind of get a broader handle on the web. And also there's like the voting thing on Stack Overflow, and then there's the thumbs up and thumbs down thing on GitHub as well. So yeah, I mean, those are really, really, really good resources that I've used. There is one resource though that I have used that I don't use anymore. It's one resource that I started, the first ever resource that I ever used. And this was way back before Twitter, way before Facebook. And this is DevShed. This is a forum. This is, and I badgered the hell out of people on that. So if anybody has answered a PFWD post on DevShed and has struggled with me to get my PHP code to go, I just want to say a massive thank you, because that is the first resource that I ever used to learn code. So DevShed has various different forums, different topics, different programming language. I haven't been there for yonks, so I don't even know if it exists anymore or what the status of it is. But when I started out, it was great. But the thing is, you've got to remember, back in that day, there wasn't like, it wasn't this instant answer that you get these days. It wasn't like Twitter where you can just throw a question out into the ether and then maybe you'll get an answer back. in 10 minutes time. Or it wasn't this thing where, open source, there was lots of maintainers that you could just tap into. This was a time where you would write a post and then it could literally take you weeks to get an answer back. So, and there was a lot of mistakes that I had made, and a lot of people were patient and were able to highlight the errors in my syntax and my code. And it was basically the early days of me learning to code outside of college and university. So I guess what I should say is, if you find a resource, even if it's a resource that isn't on here, if it is a resource that isn't on here, please let me know though, because it's obviously this isn't the definitive guide, but it'd be interesting to know if you've got any better resources than this, because it would broaden my horizons out. But the thing is, if you find a resource that you really, really, really like and you can use really efficiently, then just use it. Just use it. Don't try and use the thing that everybody uses. Use the thing that you find useful. That's probably where I'll end that. If it works for you, it works for you. Thank you ever so much, everybody, for listening and being a part of it. Episode 100. It's totally breathtaking how this has gone. It's brilliant. And if you're new here, please do listen back from the earlier episodes, because the earlier episodes we had from season 2, I think it was from halfway through season 1 to halfway through, I think, season 3, we had a lot of guests on. Every week we had a guest on. And so, it was me interviewing a guest, talking about a particular web development topic or a coding topic. And I was learning as I was interviewing. And it was great. It wasn't live. It wasn't like this. It was mostly, it was all pre-recorded. I don't do those so much now because of the time it takes of researching the guest, and also coming up with questions, and also organizing when the show will be on. I do want to do that again in the future. Definitely want to do that in the future. I know that there are people out there who want to be on this show. So there will be a time when hopefully those people will be able to come on. It's a question of timing, and it's a question of I suppose it's a question of timing. So that it'll happen. It will happen. But yeah, massive thank you for everyone who's stuck by, and for the lots of you who listen. And I suppose a big reminder that this is a live thing, right? So you can watch this at 8 o'clock on a Thursday and actually have a communication with me, and as we do this show. So anyway, happy coding, everyone. Massive happy coding, and I will see you again this Sunday on Twitch at 14:30 GM or BST even. So 14:30 BST on Twitch. And and if you haven't joined our Discord server, go to howtocodewell.net/Discord, join, say hello, and join our community. It's great. Thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone, and I'll see you again next time. Cheers.